And today we're going to look at an interesting story in scripture on the story of Joab, who was one of David's military leaders. He was the general in David's army in his fight against Saul and his army. We're going to look at this man and his relationship with David and the subject of repayment. It's going to take a little time to get into the story, but I'm going to encourage you to read this story about Joab because it's a very, very interesting story. And one in the scripture, I believe, for us to learn some principles, many principles we can learn from this man's life. Okay, I'm going to share some scriptures concerning repayment, and it's taken primarily from 2 Samuel. And the story, I want to give the background of the story. I would encourage you to read the story about Joab. And there's more to this man than this particular aspect. He is David's general. He's the one that's in charge of David's army. And remember, there was a long war between the house of David and the house of Saul. Even after Saul killed himself, there was still a struggle for David to come into the kingdom as the king of all of Israel. David was anointed to be the king over Judah and Benjamin, because that's primarily the tribe he was from. But other tribes still followed Saul's leadership. Even though he was dead, Saul's general's name was Abner. And he put one of Saul's sons as the king in opposition to David. So there's a battle going on between the house of David and the house of Saul. And there are really four individuals whose names you can look up. The first is Joab. He is David's general. Joab's brothers. One is named Asahel, Asahel. The other one, his name, let me think of his name. His name is escaping me quick. Abishai. His name is Abishai. He's one of David's mighty men. So these are tremendous warriors that fought for David. And then there's Abner, who is the general of Saul's army. Now, Asahel, one of the brothers of Joab, was killed in a battle, and Abner was the one that killed him. Abner killed him because he kept pursuing Abner in a battle. And Abner told him to turn around, and he would not. And so Abner killed him, really in self-defense. And when he killed this young man, this soldier, his brother Joab became very bitter. He was angry at the fact that his brother was killed by Abner, and he held bitterness in his heart, and he had a hatred for Abner. He wanted to kill Abner for killing his brother. So in the course of time, Abner began to understand that David was going to win this war. And so he came to David and made a deal with David saying, I'll bring all of Israel under your rule and reign if you'll agree to make a covenant with me. And David agreed. And so Abner comes, meets with David, and they have fellowship. David receives him. And so now we're seeing that Abner is going to use his authority as the general of the opposing army to bring all of Israel under David's command. And so David agreed. David is an honorable king. David agreed to the conditions of Abner. And as Abner is going back home, Joab hears that David has met with Abner. And so Joab plans a plot to kill Abner. So he calls Abner back and says, David wants to meet with you again. But David did not know about this. And so when Abner comes back, Joab meets with Abner. These are two generals, and takes him aside and takes a knife out and kills him, murders him under false pretense. Now, when this happened, David understood that it was something that he had to deal with. And so David, the first thing David does is says, I had nothing to do with this, because David did not want people to think that he was in agreement with Joab of killing this general, killing this innocent man. And so David made a statement, I had nothing to do with this. This is something that was done by Joab, and David really renounced it because David is an honorable king. He's an honorable man, and he would never be guilty of murder. He'd already made an agreement with this man. And this affects David so badly. David is, if you read this story, primarily in 2 Samuel, 2 Samuel chapter 2 and chapter 3, you'll see that this really affected David. As a matter of fact, David actually called a day of mourning for Abner and had all of Israel, all of those under his command, to fast and mourn and weep for Abner. And then David says something very interesting concerning Abner. It says, let me read 2 Samuel chapter 3. You can write these verses down. 2 Samuel chapter 3, verses 28 and 29. It says, and afterward, when David heard it, he said, I and my kingdom are guiltless before the Lord forever from the blood of Abner, the son of Ner. Let it rest on the head of Joab and all his father's house. And then David actually pronounces a curse on Joab and his house because of this wicked act. He says, and let there not fail from the house of Joab one that has an issue, or that is a leper, or that leaneth on a staff, or that falleth on the sword, or that lacketh bread. It's one of the worst curses in the Bible, as a matter of fact. This judgment that David pronounces on Joab and his family as a result of this murder of this general, this honorable, valiant general, even though he was an enemy, that it came to David to make peace. And then it says in 2 Samuel 3 and 33, and the king lamented over Abner and said, died Abner as a fool dieth? And so David really said that Abner died like a fool. Now, this is an interesting statement because it seems as if Abner, being a general and being a military man and knowing that he had killed Joab's brother, should have known better, that he should not have put himself in a position to be killed. He should never have trusted Joab, and to go aside to meet with him privately and allow him to kill him with a knife was something very foolish. You know, it's something interesting because one foolish decision can cost you your life. That is really what this statement is saying. That's in 2 Samuel chapter 3 and verse 33. Now, evidently, David was not in a position to do anything against Joab because Joab and his brother Abishai were so strong. They were the leaders of the armies of Israel. And so David actually said, I'm not strong enough to do anything about this. And he said that he basically had to give it to God because he wasn't in a position. That's how strong Joab was. And so David just prayed, issued this curse. But before David died, he reminded Solomon of what Joab had done. And he told Solomon, remember the deeds of Joab. This affected David so badly until David took it to his grave. And David told his son Solomon, don't forget what Joab did. You're going to deal with this. And eventually, you read in 2 Samuel chapter number 2, that when Solomon becomes the king, and there's some events that take place when Solomon actually ordered the death of Joab. Joab flees into the tabernacle and grabs the horns of the altar. This is interesting because this man who had murdered someone, who was a very ruthless leader, is now asking for mercy. But in the end, he was killed. He was actually killed in the tabernacle by Benaiah, one of the leaders in the army of Solomon. And it says this, 1 Kings chapter 2 and verse 29. And it was told King Solomon that Joab was fled unto the tabernacle of the Lord, and behold, he is by the altar. Then Solomon sent Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, saying, go, fall upon him, And Benaiah came to the tabernacle of the Lord and said to him, thus saith the king, come forth. And he said, nay, but I will die here. And Benaiah brought the king word again, saying, thus saith Joab. And thus he answered me. And the king said unto him, do as he has said, and fall upon him and bury him, that thou mayest take away the innocent blood which Joab shed from me and from the house of my father. And the Lord shall return his blood upon his own head, who fell upon 2 men more righteous and better than he, and slew them with the sword. My father David, not knowing thereof, to wit, Abner, the son of Ner, captain of the host of Israel, and Amasa, the son of Jether, captain of the host of Judah. Their blood shall therefore return upon the head of Joab and upon the head of his seed forever, but upon David and upon his seed and upon his house and upon his throne shall there be peace forever from the Lord. So Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, went up, fell upon him and slew him, and he was buried in his own house in the wilderness. And so we see that after years, and let me just read this portion. Joab fled to the tent of the tabernacle where Adonijah had previously sought successful refuge. 1 Kings chapter 1 verses 50 through 53, and told Benaiah that he would die there. Benaiah killed Joab there and thereby replaced him as commander of the army. Now, it wasn't until years later that there was repayment for the death of Abner. So sometimes repayment comes, but it comes after a period of time. Now, this is the negative aspect of repayment. And David actually said and prayed that the Lord would repay Joab for this murderous deed upon the man that he made an agreement with, this general called Abner. And so repayment, often in the negative, is revenge. Vengeance belongs to God, and God does repay. Now, I tried to stay in the positive realm, which is about God repaying good, but it also operates in the negative realm. And Joab is an example. This man was killed in the tabernacle. He was repaid for his vicious acts, really upon 2 individuals. He murdered 2 people, one Amasa, but the one we're dealing with now is Abner. And these are some interesting stories in scripture that really bring out how God is a God of justice. What I love about this is it really reveals the heart of David. David was a righteous king. David never, except for the case of Uriah the Hittite, who he had murdered. And by the way, Joab was the one that David told to put Uriah the Hittite in the front so he could be killed. And Joab was the one that did it. So that's the only time that David did something that was unjust, and David repented for that, and he was just for that. But David, on the most part, was a man after God's own heart. And he was so heartbroken that even though his former enemy, even though this general was his enemy, because this man came to him and made an agreement with him, he was a man that honored his word. He was a man of integrity. And when Joab killed this man, it affected David so badly until David remembered it until the day he died, and reminded his son Solomon, who would carry out the judgment on this man Joab. So it really reveals the heart of David. I love David because David is a man after God's own heart. And David is not one that returns evil for good. David is one that is integrous, and we should always be people of integrity and people that never return evil for good. And remember that wickedness does have a payday. Wickedness does have a repayment day. It's not good to be wicked. It's not good to murder. It's not good to kill. It's not good to do unjustly, because there is a day of judgment. Now, this man Joab, when he did it, was so strong as the leader and general of the army that David couldn't do anything to do anything at that time. But in the course of time, he was judged. You know, sometimes wicked people are so strong in their power that they think they can do something and get away with it. But eventually there is repayment. And this is found in the story of Joab. It really should cause us to understand the fear of the Lord, justice. These are some elements in this story: justice, vindication, retribution, the shedding of innocent blood, murder, repayment, recompense. All of these are found in the story of Joab. By the way, Joab was also the one that shot 3 darts in the heart of Absalom. When Absalom was found hanging in a tree, he finished the job because he was upset with David, because he felt that David favored Absalom, even though Absalom rebelled against him. Let me say this. It seems as if Joab, even though he was David's general, and even though he supported David, it seems like his motivation was never the kingdom. His motivation was to be in power. Sometimes people can be with an anointed man of God, and their motivation is not for the plans and purposes of God. It's for their own empowerment. It seems like this man Joab was a man that loved power, position. He was ambitious. He did it simply for that. He was not a man of integrity. He was not a man like David that is the same moral character as David. So we have to be very careful as anointed people of God, that leaders, that we have to be very careful who we give power to, because there can be people that can be on your team who are there not because they're following the plans and purposes of God. It's because they're just ambitious and they know that you're going to take them somewhere. But eventually that will backfire on people who use their position in an ungodly way. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. I know I spent a little time talking about these different characters. You may have to go and read the story for yourself. Very interesting story. It's in the scripture for a purpose. It does give us some tremendous insight on the plans and purposes of God, on the heart of people, especially people in leadership. So take advantage of these stories. Thank you so much for coming on. We're going to continue this series on repayment tomorrow on the porch at the same time. I want to thank all of those that are sowing and giving, supporting this ministry. If you're being blessed, please sow a seed. Don't hold back. Give, and it shall be given unto you. I bless you. I'm asking many of you as possible to sow a seed of $40 this month. If you've done it again, thank you so much. If you've not done it, consider it. Look at the giving addresses I've given on the day's program. And as always, in departing, until you hear from me again, may God bless you and double shalom.